You're listening to the Allianz Australia You Belong podcast series, where we explore why diversity is a fact, inclusion is a verb, and belonging is our goal. My name is Cara McLeod, and I'm the Regional Employer Branding Leader within the HR team. At Allianz, diversity and inclusion are symbols of our commitment to ensuring that whoever you are and whatever your role, you feel you belong and you feel valued. Throughout this series, I'll be in conversation with colleagues and special guests who will share personal stories and experiences that have shaped who they are. Our conversations will uncover why inclusion matters and how we can all play a part in creating an environment of belonging. This is the Allianz Australia You Belong podcast series. It's my great pleasure to be joined by Allianz Ambassador Cate Campbell, who many of our listeners will know is a renowned Australian sprint swimming world champion and Olympian. She's medalled in 3 successive Olympic Games in the 4x100 metre relay and has 34 international medals, including 5 Olympic medals. What you may not know is that Cate is the eldest of 5 children and was born in a small African country called Malawi. Cate and her family immigrated to Brisbane when she was 9, and soon after she joined the local swim club and set her sights on becoming an Olympic swimmer, and she's never looked back. In between staring at black lines of a pool for over 5 hours a day, Cate is also completing a media and communications degree due to her interest in writing and media. Cate's also passionate about gender equity and believes it's important to celebrate the fact that men and women are different, as diversity drives creativity and creativity drives innovation. Welcome, Cate. I'm so truly very excited to have the opportunity to speak with you today, and thank you for making time in your really busy, hectic schedule.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have a chat.
Actually, why don't we start there? Straight off the cuff, I'd just love to understand a bit more about your training schedule and the lead up to Tokyo. What does it look like for you?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I describe the lead into an Olympic Games as kind of athletes go into, we call it almost like an Olympic lockdown. So everyone around Australia, and I feel so incredibly sorry for the Victorians who had to do it for longer than anyone, experienced a kind of lockdown last year where you don't go out much, you stay at home, and life is pretty boring and monotonous. That is kind of the life of an athlete in an Olympic year. At the moment, my week has 9 swim sessions, 3 gym sessions, 2 spin bike sessions, a Pilates session, and at least 1 physio and 1 massage session.
In the intro, I mentioned the fact that you grew up in Malawi. And I mean, I'm just very curious about this, especially from a cultural diversity perspective. What are some of the memories you have of that time? Because that's a fair chunk of your childhood, being in Malawi up until about the age of 9.
Yeah. It's I feel actually incredibly lucky that I was born in a country like Malawi. I think that it has taught me to appreciate the things in life that Australia can give you. I remember coming to Australia for the first time and being amazed at how clean everything was. Like, all the roads had gutters. Every traffic light we went to worked. There's this one memory that I have of watching the garbage truck come for the first time. And I had never seen anything as high tech as that garbage truck that reaches out its little arm, grasps the bin and empties the rubbish bin into the rubbish truck. I think very early on, I learned and I recognized that we are in an incredibly privileged country. And there are things that people who are born here completely take for granted. In terms of diversity, I probably did, in Africa, there's a large native population. So you were friends with a lot of people of color, and we were in a house that had servants, and most people kind of scrunch their nose up at that. But ultimately, we were giving them employment opportunities.
Yep.
And we always, and my parents were always really strong about this, we always treated them with the utmost respect. they were our equals. Yes, they were working for us and they were doing jobs, but in the same way that people have cleaners in this country, they were performing a service. It taught me both to appreciate the small things in life, but then also to respect everyone equally, no matter what they do or what background they come from.
Absolutely. And I guess the decision to move to Australia when you were 9, what was the tipping point there? What was the reason behind that for your parents to move you all to Australia?
So the move was really triggered. Firstly, there's not a lot of opportunity in Africa for future development, and I was getting to an age where 9 years old, starting to reach the middle of primary school. But then my brother has very severe cerebral palsy and suffered quite a lot of brain damage due to a really traumatic birth. He was actually a stillborn in Malawi, and having a stillborn child in a third world country is not recommended, to put it lightly. He was incredibly lucky that they managed to save him. So Mum kind of fell pregnant by surprise with their fifth child, so my last little sister, and they just kind of felt like it wasn't safe to have another birth in Africa. They needed to be in a first world country for that. On top of the fact that Hamish, my brother, would probably be needing some quite significant care in the future, and so they applied to the US and to Australia, and Australia came back first, and thank goodness they did.
They're lost.
Exactly.
Now we have you as our Olympic champion and not them.
Exactly right.
You're listening to the Allianz Australia You Belong podcast series. I'm Cara McLeod, and today I have the great honour of speaking to Olympian Cate Campbell. Cate, how do you go from rocking up at a local pool at 9 to 7 years later being at your first Olympics at 16, winning 2 bronze medals and navigating being a teenager, doing high school, having friends, having social life? How did that even work?
Yeah, well, when you put it like that, it seems quite far-fetched, doesn't it? At the time,
yes,
it seemed
totally.
like...
I was thinking about my questions for you, going, hold on, I know what this woman's accomplished, but let me just go back to that first Olympics and just dealing with being a teenager.
Oh my gosh, I know. Yeah, when you say it like that, you're like, and I look at it, I'm like, did that really happen? But it's so weird because at the time, it was completely normal to me. I was probably one of those like stupidly focused and driven kids in that I figured out that I wanted to go to the Olympics, and I figured out that swimming was my way to get there. And so then I would quite happily do whatever it took to do that. The way that Mum used to have to discipline me when I was a teenager was say, Cate, if you don't behave, I'm not going to drive you to swimming training at 5 a.m. in the morning. So yeah, it really kind of progressed from there. I think I was obviously had a natural ability. I'd found a really good coach, that same coach that I met when I was 9 years old, that I stumbled into a little local swimming club at a primary school and met my coach, Simon. And it's actually funny. It will be almost exactly 20 years to the day that we met at the opening ceremony of the Tokyo 2021 Olympics. In terms of navigating sort of your teenage years, and who really knows how to do that? I think that I was incredibly lucky that I was never told that I couldn't do something. My parents were very good at letting us figure out what we wanted to do with our lives and then supporting us 100%. So from the time that I was, 9 or 10 and I said that I wanted to go to the Olympics, I was never told that was impossible, or do you know how hard that's going to be, or maybe you should, think of something more realistic. They were like, okay, well, if you want to do this, then we'll support you. We'll drive you to training at 5 a.m. every morning. We'll sit beside a swimming pool all day, every weekend. So I was very, very lucky to never have like the limits of my dreams kind of probably shifted into line by an adult reality. I think that sometimes we look at childhood dreams and we're like, oh, come on. And we get cynical as we get older. And I was lucky in that I found a group of friends at school who didn't really care what I did or how I swam.
They accepted you for who you were.
Yeah, exactly right. And they accepted that they probably wouldn't see me all that often and that I stunk of chlorine when I got to school every day.
That must have been a very endearing quality.
I guess I was just really fortunate in the people who I chose to associate with and have in my inner circle.
I mean, I have to say, Kate, I read and I've reread, I've heard you speak your open letter, and it moves me every time. And I reread your words over and over again. And man, nobody could ever accuse you of not caring. Not after reading that letter. Come on. And to be honest, what connected with me the most was your incredible vulnerability of letting the entire world into your heart and soul, and maybe even your own healing process. And I'm going to be very honest, I do not think those keyboard warriors deserved or were worthy of the eloquence that came through in that letter. So your writing is incredibly moving and very beautiful. But can I ask, can you share a little bit about why you wanted to write that letter and what you hoped it would achieve?
Yeah, of course. So to provide people some context, I wrote a letter following the 2016 Olympics. So I went into those Olympics ranked number 1 in the 100-meter freestyle. I had broken the world record just a couple of months beforehand. I was, the undisputed, like red hot favorite. I went into those games, had an incredible night on night 1. I was part of a gold medal winning 4x100 freestyle relay team, and we ended up breaking a world record, winning an Olympic gold medal. I got to do that with my sister beside me. She was in the team with me. And then a couple of days later, it was the 100-meter freestyle. And well, I guess the short answer is that I didn't win, and I came 6th. And there are a lot of reasons as to why that happened. Some were in my control, and I've now come to realize in retrospect that some were outside of my control. But whatever contributed to it, the result was the same. And it's kind of one of those moments where everything you fear comes true all at once. Everything that I was afraid of going into that race. And I went into that race not excited to showcase all of my hard work and the time and the effort that I'd put into it. Not to say, here I am, have a look, let's see what I can do. I went in being like, oh my goodness, I have to win because so many people's happiness depends on me winning, There's the kids at school who have written to me. There's, the people who have bet on me. There's my friends, my family, my coach, everyone. And all of their happiness hangs in the balance, and I have to win, and there is no other option. Now, of course, I didn't. And all of those fears that I had came true. It made me reevaluate or have a look at how we see failure. Particularly in the aftermath of that and the way that I was treated, particularly by the media and by social media trolls. I just thought, I have poured so much of myself into this performance, and how, just because the outcome isn't exactly what I want, how is all of that worthless? And isn't it amazing how quickly people turn on you? And so I kind of looked at it and was like, we need to change the way that we go about seeing failure. And because it's one of those really strange paradox in life that the only place where failure is possible is also the place where success is possible. So if we're priming people and we're telling them and we're reinforcing how terrible it's going to be when they fail, they're not going to go to a place where they could possibly succeed because they're going to be so afraid of the repercussions of failure. And I guess that's something that a message that I wanted to share with people, in that, yes, failure hurts and it's horrible, but it's also a natural part of life. And it's not something that I should feel ashamed about, because you know what? I still went out there and I still tried.
I just found it a massive call to arms. You're basically telling people, stop shaming people. And I really do hope, your words around fear and failure and how, you've explained that and seen the value in it. I hope it's cited over and over and over and again. This is the Allianz Australia You Belong podcast series. I'm Cara McLeod and I'm joined by Olympian Cate Campbell. In your experience, is failure something which is treated the same irrespective of gender between men and women in sport?
Yeah, I think that when I watch sport, I don't watch it to watch people win or lose. I watch them try. And I think that that's an important thing. And it doesn't matter who you are, what gender you are. If there is a level of effort, then it is a riveting match. And I don't think that it matters, what you look like, where you come from, what gender you are. If you can, you want to watch someone pour their heart and soul out into a performance. And I think that holds true across every sport. Something that I probably struggle with when people talk about like men and women's sport is they're like, women's sport, it's so boring because it's not as fast, or it looks different to men's sport. But of course it's going to look different to men's sport. Like, men and women are different. We are fundamentally, physically different. And there is absolutely nothing that we can do about it. But just because it looks different doesn't mean that it's not of an equal standard or quality.
The theme for this year for International Women's Day is choose to challenge. So when it comes to women in sport, what's a stereotype or a bias that you want to challenge?
Firstly, I love the choose to challenge, because I think that by challenging things, we're taking a stance and saying, no, what we've got at the moment isn't good enough, and we can do better, and we can think about things differently, and we can get innovative and creative. And I love that. I guess that something that is really noticeable in girl sport is that you can't be what you can't see. And if we are not making women's sport visible, then we are disadvantaging the young girls who are playing sport at grassroots level, because they have no role models to look up to. They don't have people to look up to and say, hey, I want to be that when I grow up, or I can do this. And me playing this sport is just as valuable as, that little boy over there. There's an avenue for him. There should be an avenue for me, but I don't even know what that looks like. And I think that we are starting to get better. The women's cricket, women's AFL and women's NRL, even to a certain extent, are really starting to become more visible. And this is so, so exciting, because we want girls to remain as active and healthy as they can possibly be during their entire lives. And kind of when girls are reaching sort of 12 to 13, we see a real drop off in sport participation. And often that's just because they just don't know what else they can do with it. This is fun, but then also I'm getting a little bit sweaty, and it's kind of not cool to be sweaty. I don't really want to get too muscly, because if I have really broad shoulders, then that doesn't work. And I don't look the way that a girl should look. But if we have some really strong, successful, powerful role models for them to look up to, then they can say, yeah, I want to be like Elise Perry. I want to play cricket for Australia. For my sport, swimming, we've always been incredibly lucky that it's been quite a gender equal sport. We've had great success from men and women, and I've always had really strong female role models to look up to.
When we think about some of the conversations we have in the corporate world, front and center of many of those conversations around closing the gender gap is the number of women in leadership roles. So again, would like your views and observations on, how does that play out in the sporting world when it comes to thinking about those in very senior governing body positions and having that mix of male and female leaders in those kind of roles. And you've been in this sport or in the sporting world for so long. What sort of shifts have you seen in terms of the different leadership styles that have been coming through?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Sport is still predominantly and very heavily a male-dominated industry. There are very, very few female coaches, sort of a few sports scientists. That's probably an area where they have closer parity. But in your coaches, in your administrative roles, in any of those corporate governance roles, it is very, very gendered towards men. And we have actually, Suing Australia had a female CEO. She has just resigned, but Lee Russell. And for the first time, it was really interesting having a woman at the helm of the sport, and really interesting to see the different way that she operates and her different perspectives that she brought. And I would say that she has helped bridge the gap between, the swimmers and the administrative side of sport, which can traditionally have quite a bit of tension. And look, I don't know if that's because who she was as a person, or if it was because she was a female and she had probably understood some of the struggles of what it's like to be marginalized and to be silenced. And so she wasn't afraid to do things a little bit differently. The tendency to be more inclusive and less ego-driven is something that I really saw under Lee's leadership. And it was really eye-opening to be under some female leadership for a change.
You're listening to the Allianz Australia You Belong podcast series. I'm Cara McLeod, and today I have the great honour of speaking to Olympian Cate Campbell. I think we've come so far in the corporate world around the stigma or the fear of leaving your career to have a baby and the impact it'll have on your progression, your opportunities when you come back. I just can't even imagine conversations that are either playing out in women's minds in sport and, trying to work out when is a good time, when isn't a good time, what's the impact it's going to have on my body physically. I mean, that's a whole other level of perhaps fear.
I think it's different for different sports, but I also think that it's beginning to change for the better. Netball Australia have brought in things like paid maternity leave into their contracts, and we've seen women like Laura Geitz go away and have a child and come back and be able to play for Australia. In terms of swimming, it's a little bit different. We're not on contract, so to speak. Every year we have to re-qualify for the team. So we're on like yearly contracts, and so we have no real certainty year to year of what that looks like. And in this country, no one has attempted the having a baby and coming back. Let's not forget that men can also lobby for more maternity leave. So they, this doesn't just benefit women, this can benefit men. If you're in a dual income household, why is it that the woman has to, give up her career? Obviously, she has to have the baby and she has to have time off. But why can't we think of different ways to view having a baby and child rearing? Why can't the child caring role fall to the man, after the first year or whatever it is? When we're talking about giving women choices, we're actually giving men choices as well, because I'm sure that there are some men who would love to be stay-at-home dads and have that opportunity and be quite happy to let their wives further their careers and be more ambitious.
And to quote you again from a previous comment, you can't be what you can't see. And for men in this space, I think that's also quite evident. The more men we have taking paternity leave and taking that option, the more visible they become, the more of a role model they will be. So it's very interesting. It is very much about men and women having choice here in this space.
Yeah, and it's about challenging the norms. It's about looking at the way things are done and saying, hey, is this really the best way that we can do it? Or can we do something else?
Is there any final last comments that you'd like to share with us and our listeners today?
Maybe it's just sometimes we feel a bit overwhelmed about, there are all these issues and what can I do? But I think that being really true to yourself and honest about who you are and what you want is really important. And just because society dictates how we should behave or how we should act doesn't mean that that is what you should do. You know, if you want to be a stay-at-home mum and raise your children, that's okay. You know, my mum was a stay-at-home mum of 5, and she's just gone back and restudied midwifery and has just graduated as a midwife, you know, after taking 25 years out of the profession. But if you are really ambitious and you're smart and you're driven, and as a woman you do want to achieve things, then nothing should stand in your way. And you also shouldn't be ashamed of that ambition and that drive. I think so often we're like, we see a high-powered woman and we're like, oh, but I wonder what it's like at home. Or, you know, I know that some of my friends are afraid to say, you know, speak what their goals are out loud because it could be seen as being prideful or boastful. But in reality, we applaud particularly men who are really ambitious and go after what they want and are really authentic about the way they do it. And I think that as women, we really need to embrace that as well.
It really has been so very interesting listening to all your experiences from growing up in Malawi to going through 2016 and coming out the other side even stronger and an incredible role model and ambassador for your sport, through to hearing your views on gender equality, areas where I think we absolutely have the opportunity to, you know, level that playing field. And finally, I really would just from the bottom of my heart want to wish you all the very, very best for Tokyo.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really, really honoured to be on here and very excited for the Olympics that are happening. Don't listen to the news. They are happening.
For sure. Thanks so much. You've been listening to the Allianz Australia You Belong podcast series. For more episodes in this series, go to the D&I Collaborate page. We will also see ways you can get involved. My name's Cara McLeod, and thanks for joining me.